Hey, what's up guys? Houston here. Someone asks, is it really possible to get $50,000 in business funding with just your EIN number? And the reality of it, yes, you can. However, there's multiple things that you have to take into consideration. It's just not a direct thing, get $50,000 with your EIN number, okay? Especially when most people, they're trying to get like business credit cards, and people are telling you, oh, get 50,000 business credit card funding with just your EIN number. Well, here's the truth about it. All right, so you understand. There's multiple factors. Number one is that in terms of the type of business you have, okay? That's one of the biggest things that most people overlook, because if you have a high risk type of business, it's going to be very challenging for a lender to be willing to give you funding. Not saying that it's impossible, but it's definitely going to be challenging. And I'm going to give you some examples of some business lenders that will work with you, okay? But you need to understand. So focusing on the right type of NAICS code is one of the biggest challenges that most people are not really aware of, especially when you go into institutions where you don't have any revenue in the business. That brings up number two, okay? You're trying to get business credit funding with business credit cards and you have no revenue in the business, okay? This is what they're heavily relying on, okay? If you don't want us to use your social or your personal credit, then how much revenue you have in the business, okay? Do you have sales in the revenue? Do you have net profits in the company? And here's the biggest thing that most people, especially if they have like a pass-through, like a S Corp or LLC, they make the mistake of, is because when they file their taxes and stuff, they always want to show a loss, okay? Now, when you show a loss in your business, this is actually crippling you. So when many people, they go to like a legal Zoom, or they may go to an attorney or a CPA or somebody like that to help them register their business, their main focus is, okay, you're probably trying to avoid paying a lot of taxes. They're not trying to look at you as a growth company. That's the reason why I tell you, you have to be very careful with whoever is setting up the company, because they may not be setting up a growth company in order to help you qualify for more funding. Now, it's not impossible for you to get a lot of funding with a pass-through company like a LLC or S Corp. However, if you have a growth company, you seem to jump to the head of the line, all right? And that's one of the bigger challenges, especially when people trying to get more funding. Now, here's another thing, your business credit file, okay? Do you have an established business credit file, all right? Now, with some people, they're thinking coming out of the gate, brand new startup, you know, and you trying to get business funding. Again, if you don't have no revenue, you don't have an established business credit file, then it's going to be very challenging. Again, not saying it's impossible, but it's definitely going to be very challenging for you to get qualified for funding, okay? And so what I mean by that is in terms of, have you prepped your file? Okay, and when you prepping your file, that means that if you're trying to go for EIN only funding, all right, then how many trade lines do you have on the file? How many net 30 trade accounts do you have? Do you have the right type of trade accounts on the file? Because most people, they would put like a Granger, Seaton, or U-line on the file, right? So those are like for product-based type of business credit. Okay, that's not for like your actual loans. So that's the reason why with some people, well, I got 10, 12 trade lines or whatever. But if they're not financial trade lines, then that's where it all makes the difference, okay? And for most people, they're not explained this. So that's the reason why they keep spinning their wheels when it comes time to get qualified for funding. All right. So that's the reason why I always tell you, if you're trying to get funding, especially as a startup, if you can't get qualified for a grant, and that's another thing, going to like trying to get a grant or whatever, with a lot of these startup businesses, one of the key elements of getting qualified for a grant is actually having a business plan, having a marketing plan, having a projected profit and loss statements. So these are things that for most startups, they do not have this type of paperwork in place for even qualifying for a grant. That's the reason why I don't care too much for trying to chase a grant, because it's too much hassle. All right. That's the reason I try to find the lowest hanging fruit for us creditors that will actually start giving you credit cards and stuff like that without having any revenue in the business, but you may have some type of credit file, right? So that's the reason why I continue to tell you guys that you really have to have an established credit file. Because with most lenders, they'll say, okay, you don't want to use your EIN. Most lenders, they want you to have an established file for at least 2 years. Okay? If it's going to be less than 2 years, then again, your annual revenue, usually they want at least $50,000 in annual revenue. Okay, so that's the reason why I continue to tell you guys it is possible to get $50,000 in business credit funding. However, most of the time with new startups and stuff, if you're not using your credit, you're going to have collateral, or you're going to have high revenue. Now, like with an e-commerce type of business, that type of business will jump off and you can generate revenue in it, or a marketing company or something like that, where you can generate high revenue right away, and it's not a high risk type of business. So that's the reason why I continue to tell you guys, it's just certain type of entities and businesses that you should set up in order to qualify. Now, in terms of who will give you $50,000 with just your EIN number. All right. So remember, I mentioned a long time ago, like with American Express, they will give you funding with just your EIN, but you have to have high revenue in the business. And what I mean by high revenue, they're wanting ridiculous amounts like $2 million. So you do not want to go that route with like a company like American Express. All right. So you would have to really focus on like companies that more or less are like fintech companies that have more flexibility and stuff. All right. And most of the time, the type of funding they're going to give you is not with a revolving credit card. They're going to give you charge cards, okay? So that's another thing that you have to take into consideration in terms of, if they're giving you charge card, are you going to be making enough revenue to pay it off? Like with a Divvy, right? So take Divvy, for example, Bill Divvy. What it is that they will give you a charge card. And it depends on the time frame which you anticipate them paying the money back. They'll do it with just your EIN number, right? So if it's 1 week, they'll give you more money versus a bi-weekly or monthly, they give you less money. So it just depends on the institution. Like with NAV will give you a charge card, right? And here's the thing about it. Again, going off of not doing a hard pull on the credit and stuff, but if you are a new business and you're trying to just look at the EIN or whatever, again, because you may not have high revenue in the business, they're not going to give you the funding that you actually are looking for. Okay, so then you have companies like A to B Gas. Like A to B Gas, you can get a gas card or whatever, something like that. But again, having something that they can actually look at it for as collateralized. Now you have Brex, and again, Brex is another one of those charge card companies. They'll give you a high limit, but again, you have to have revenue to show proof. All right. Now with Fair Figure actually will give you a loan if you have revenue in the business. They won't give you a credit card. They'll actually give you a loan. All right. Now, granted that the minimum in order to qualify for a loan is you making at least $2,500. However, if you wanting up to $50,000, you're gonna have to have high revenue in the business. Okay, so these are things that some people just don't understand. Now, in terms of when I was talking about even prepping the file, so when you're prepping the file, you want to make sure that you have financial trade accounts that are reporting both on with Equifax and TransUnion and picked up with Small Business Financial Exchange. And so again, those can be very conservative when it comes to those. So that's the reason, like I tell you about NAV and Fair Figure, because with those two accounts alone, they'll give you 4 different trade lines. All right. If you want like supplies and stuff, if it's just business credit supplies, because you're trying to open up a restaurant or a janitorial type of business or something like that, then you want to look at places like Crown Office Supplies, right? That reports to like Experian, Equifax, Dun & Bradstreet, or JJ Gold that reports to Dun & Bradstreet and Experian. You know, so it's just certain ones like Credit Strong will give you a financial trade line, right? So then that'll be like 3 trade lines with Credit Strong, NAV, Fair Figure. All right. And then with Divvy makes it a 5th one. All right. Now, some people may say, well, what about Capital One Tap? Now, here's the thing about it with Capital One Tap. Yes, they will give you funding with just your EIN. However, you have to have revenue that they can actually verify in terms of giving you funding and stuff like that. Now, when you have real bad credit, and you just needing small amounts, so then that's when you have to look at companies like Lendeska that will give you up to $20,000 of business funding, again going off the revenue in the business, not off the personal credit. Then you have Fundo that gives you up to $10,000, okay, just off the revenue in the business. And then you have Giggle Finance that also looks at that. But again, going back, letting you guys know, yes, it's possible to get $50,000 in business funding with just your EIN number. However, one of the bigger things, especially as a new business, one of the bigger challenges is you have to have high revenue. All right. And I hope this video is informative. If you enjoyed the video, I appreciate it if you share the video. Click the link in the description if you have questions. Schedule a one-on-one consultation. Thank you.